Welcome to this week's edition of the Belau Report. I'm Jane Belau. Our guest, City Councilman from the 5th Ward.
Correct.
And it is Shaun Palmer. And we know we've had him before. And last 2 weeks ago, we had David Bransford from the 2nd Ward. And we spent a whole half hour and we didn't get all the issues covered, so we're going to cover the rest of them tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh,
And Mark Bransford is a good guy from the 2nd Ward, so
yeah.
he's in his first term.
Yep. All right. And the redistricting was the first thing that we talked about, because that was when the council was thinking whether they were going to approve it or not. And you did, huh?
Yeah, it's a long story, because of the census. Every 10 years, we then have to redistrict to kind of even out how we do everything. And so the city of Rochester has a charter, and the charter tells us what we can and can't do, and sets up basically the constitution for the city. And in their recommendations, we have to be north and south and east and west and be as compact as we can, and then have our numbers be close to being equal. And so then the city council also put a recommendation that we look at people of interest to try to group people together and make that a little bit fairer for everybody. Not been a big issue. They came up with 4 maps. The first 3 maps were interesting. The 4th map that came up put Kelly Fitzpatrick from the 4th Ward in my ward, and moved Keene out of his ward, out of the 1st Ward, into the 4th Ward, so he would have had to move or not run. And then we came up with the 7th map, and not we, but the staff did. And they had the public hearings, and they had people show up and say, this is what we like, and they brought it to us, and we discussed it, and we voted on it, and we put it together and passed it. And then we had to have a special meeting, because then we had to have a timeline for a 2nd reading. And last Thursday, we had our 2nd reading. And now the county can do their map, and they'll have their map done by the end of April.
So what does the city have to do with the county's map?
We
It's
set
just a subset.
We set our precincts, and so they can't divide our precincts up, and
Okay.
so then they do theirs. Their rules are a little different. If they have, I believe it's a 5% increase in population, they have to rerun. So you're going to see quite a few of the county commissioners have to rerun, where in ours, you don't have to rerun if you change the population growth.
So, well, it looks like it's an interesting map, because it has the green ward goes all the way down almost out of the city, right?
Goes all the way down the airport. That's Ward 1, I think is what you're talking about. It was interesting because we had growth in the city, obviously, but we didn't have as much as we did the previous 10 years. But we had 24% growth in the 1st Ward, southwest, and then in the 3rd Ward, which is northwest. In the 5th Ward grew about 11%, and some of the other wards grew just a small amount. But we're now at 121,000 people in the city of Rochester from our census take.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the interesting things from the census that I point out to people is that our poverty rate fell from 9.5% to 7.5%. So I think that's something to be proud of, and that we're working on that poverty rate to go down. So good sign for your city.
So, when you think about the new wards, what do you think?
Well, it was interesting. It was fun to kind of watch. I'm now basically northeast Rochester, northwest Rochester. I run all the way over to John Marshall. I take Century. I go all the way north along the river. And then I also got the federal prison, and I got RCC. I go all the way to Highway 14 now. So they went more southeast than I thought we would. I would have thought we would have stayed more northeast. But it is what it is, and it's done, and I think people are happy, and it will be what we have for the next election. So.
Wow. Well, you're hearing any candidates running in response to the new lines?
Not in the city council. I've not heard, the 1st Ward, which is Mr. Keene, the 3rd Ward, which is Mr. Campion, and then I on the 5th Ward are up for re-election, and then the mayor is. And there's been a couple people who have announced for the mayor race, and she has not announced if she's running for re-election or not yet. So,
Okay, I got a notice about the Southwest Historics group who now has a website
oh,
that if you live in Southwest, you're eligible to participate in that.
yeah. You know, we've worked hard. If you remember, we had some crime problems back in the early 90s, and we developed some neighborhood groups, and that was a big emphasis for Chuck Azama and the mayor, Canfield. And so neighborhood groups, I have a really active neighborhood group. We have Lower Town, which is the Goose Lake Park neighborhood, and go all the way over to Silver Lake, and they do a phenomenally good job of communicating with their neighbors and watching for issues that are important to them. They've been fun to work with. There's real good volunteers on that committee that meet and work with the neighbors.
So how is the Silver Lake pool?
Well, good news is that we gave them $90,000 to fund it again. That pool's as old as I am. It's 62 years old, and it's past its useful life. And so hopefully we're doing a master plan now with the park department, and we're going to have see what the community wants. Some of the thoughts that are out there is a bigger skate park, replace the pool. The park department would like just to do a splash pad, but I think the mayor and I and some other people are convinced that we need another pool. We shouldn't, we're growing. We shouldn't have to divide our city and have just one outdoor pool. And then skate park, and then pickleball courts. And an interesting idea came up. The old snow dump is there. It's 5 acres. See if we'd like to move Mail Field there and have a baseball field right there at the lake. So that was kind of an interesting one. And we'll see what the people want. Right now we're going through a different experience, and that is they propose to remove the dam and move it back 700 feet and shorten up the lake. April 6th, there's a public meeting, and that's going to be at the city center there on 41st Street. And they're going to invite people and do a presentation. There's a group, Friends of Silver Lake, that don't want the dam removed, and they have a lot of different questions. And the staff is pushing it, and we'll see how that comes out. The mayor is fronting that and participating in that. So it's going to be interesting. So I'll encourage you, if you like Silver Lake and the park, and get to that meeting on April 6th.
Okay, now they did pass an appropriation for the parks, right?
The citizens of Rochester, at the height of COVID, voted a referendum for $2 million, and that passed about 61%, which is what we thought it was. And be clear, everybody loves the parks in Rochester. You knock on doors, you talk to the parks, touches everybody's lives. So of that $2 million, now we've decided to take some projects in bond form. So we're going to take $1 million, pay off the bonds for 20 years, and we'll move projects forward so that we can get them done now. And that does two things. One, it gives us the immediate use of those new things. And the second thing it does is it takes away the construction inflation cost. So we know costs are going to go up in the next 20 years. So if we do them now, and interest rates are about 1% the city can borrow against. So why not take that $1 million and pay that bond off and get a lot of nice things done for Rochester. The other $1 million will go to playgrounds and fixing things up that we already exist. I think that's one of the concerns for Rochester people, is that we like building new things, but we have to take care of our old things too. And so how do we do that and do that efficiently?
Huh. That's interesting. A one-liner in one of the newsletters from the Forum Communications this morning said that, and will the city council grow in size? And I'm saying, what's this all about?
Well, there's people who like to change things because they like change, and I don't mind change, but our charter sets that we have 6 wards. And I'd like us to stay at 6 wards, and we have 1 council person at large. Minneapolis, for example, has 13 council people, 13 different wards, and they're 3 times the size that we are. I think in today's world with communications and emails, that I can reach out to my people and talk with them and communicate, and I don't see a need to add more. The thought process is that, well, it gives more people an opportunity to serve as a city council person, but it also dilutes what you do, and I would vote against it. And it would have to change in the charter, and the charter would have to, commission would have to look at it, make a recommendation, then would come to the city council, we'd have to vote, all of us as one. And then if we did, then it would become law. If we didn't, it would go to the voters if the Charter Commission thought it would. It's an idea that people have talked about, but I don't believe has any legs.
Okay. All right. We did not talk earlier about city issues and talk about the prospect for building residential housing on one of the city-owned pieces of property over by the Civic Center.
Correct.
And what do you think about that?
Well, that was, the city of Rochester probably has 25 parcels out there. And so we asked them about 6 months ago to come back, a little longer than that, come back with some recommendations, what we can do with some of this property, what is our immediate needs. Some of it is just a quarter-acre lot somewhere and we own it. Well, there's nothing really we can do with that. It doesn't have any value. But we do own the lot that's north of Mayo Civic Center. And we don't own the Wells Fargo building or that area, but we own the L around it. And so we went out for an RFP, request for proposals, and 5 people came back and they narrowed it down to 2, and then they narrowed it down to 1 person's proposal. And they're proposing, I'm gonna get it wrong, but it's a high rise about 12 stories, and then a 5-story building. And the one would be market rate and the other one would not be market rate. And that'll add, I think, almost 300 units to our housing in Rochester. And I think it's a nice proposal. There's some talk in the city council that they didn't want to have a workforce housing, lower income, and then a market rate. They wanted to mix it. But that's a really hard thing to bond for or to borrow for. So I believe we'll probably have 2 different towers and do that.
And now they're talking about more parking in the area of the old Kmart.
Yes.
And what do you think about that?
Well, that's an interesting proposal, and we're very lucky. Mr. Regan's family bought the old Kmart site, and they bought that about 4 years ago. And if they didn't buy the old Kmart, that would have been in just empty building for 15 years. But he took that out of that, and then the Mayo Clinic had a need for parking, and so they went ahead and did the parking. They got a little bit ahead of themselves and raised some trouble with the neighbors. And the plan is not to be a parking lot. Their plan is for temporary to do parking until they have a plan. So then this same company bought the Ampey site. And so they're putting together a proposal for the Ampey site, for the Kmart site, and then the Fullerton site, which is owned by Mayo Clinic, which ties you into the 6th Street Bridge. And the 6th Street Bridge has been something that's been on the plans for a long period of time, on and off. And we voted, 7 of us voted in favor of the bridge. The bridge is proposed to be $19 million with lots of fluffy stuff. I did Elton Hills Bridge for $5 million, and so I'm thinking we could probably get by with about a $9 million project. And I think some of the council members agree with me that maybe $9 million is a lot better than $19 million.
So it's still in limbo?
Well, we voted to move ahead, and there's some federal dollars out there. They'll pay about 80% of the cost. My worry is one of the proposals had, for $19 million, had like 90 flower boxes. And they're going to spend $1 million in each one of the 4 quarters of this bridge. And the tails on that, the people, the taxpayers of Rochester having to build, pay for that and forever, does not appeal to me.
So still, does DMC weigh in on this?
They do, but I think there's a confusion with DMC. When it was set up, the last authority is the city council. And really what the city council should be doing is saying, hey, we want this project, we want this project. They've got it kind of backwards right now that the DMC comes to us and say, well, this is what we would like to do. No, you work for us. And I think that you're going to see an attitude change on that. And that's the way that the state legislative actions were set up, is that the city council is in charge of this. And I think we've just, convenience, laziness, allowed them to drive the bus, and we should be driving the bus. And I think you'll see a change coming here pretty soon.
Okay, what about the chateau?
Well, that's a subject that we bought that 7 years ago. It's one of those things I think city council members from the past would say, well, that probably wasn't our best move. 7 years we've owned it and not doing much with it. We went out for proposals, and 3 companies made proposals, and one of them the city council voted to accept. and they'll use it for temporary for 3 years. I wasn't in favor of that. I'm more in favor of selling the facility because then the developer can get tax credits. And we can put a caveat on the deed that says, you know, cannot be torn down, you need to maintain it and protect it, because nobody wants that building torn down. It's not going to get torn down. But how do you fix it, and what's the best need for that, what's the best use for that?
So what is the organization that's got the contract for interim management?
I don't know that, I don't remember their name. It wasn't something that I was that involved with. I mean, I read it and we looked at the proposals. It wasn't the proposal that I was in favor of. The city departments, the park department, the music department made a proposal, and I was in favor of that one. I thought that they would do a better job of running it. And so the company that got it also was with the castle, and they got booted out of the castle, or something happened on the castle. I'm not particularly sure what the details are on it, but they're going to run Chateau. And to me, it was going to be a cafeteria or a cafe and some art stuff, and not really a lot of performing stuff. So I'm not sure how well successful it's going to be.
Okay, but the decision was made.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, they have a 3-year contract with the city.
Okay. Because that's another one that was kind of led by DMC.
Well, it was led by DMC, but also Mayor Brady was with that, and you know, there's a lot of thought, and I agree with this thought, is that, you know, if we're going to make it a performing arts center, let's make it a performing arts center, do it right. You know, again, you know, big numbers, $20 million probably to do it right. But, you know, we have Mayo Civic Auditorium. The Chateau would give you an opportunity for something that we don't have at Mayo Civic Auditorium. You know, we changed the management type there. Joe Ward and his people have done a phenomenally good job at Mayo Civic Auditorium, bringing in new acts during COVID, working with everybody on COVID, and really, we literally didn't lose any money. We made some money. The Fargo Dome, I always like to point out, lost $1 million during COVID, in the first time in 20 years that they did. So Joe, I really, his team and his team have done a very good job of running that Mayo Civic Auditorium.
Okay. You know, do you think the library is going to go ahead with its plan that put housing together with the library?
No, you know, I go back to our charter. You know, the library is a charter board. Their executive director just left. We had nothing to do with hiring the new one. They act on their own. We did replace, gave them money to replace the roof. There is an ability to raise that roof, put 2 more stories on it. The problem with the library is that you and I probably think of it as a collection. They have books. You go and you look at the books. They have reading time for kids. They do that kind of stuff. They have expanded their mission by so much. The last number that I heard is that about 30% of Rochester residents have a library card. And so, you know, what do we need with the library, and how do you readjust that? There was a thought process that they would go with the old Post Bulletin site, but I don't think that they had enough support to do that, and the developer needed to know within 3-4 months if the city council could make that decision. It was incapable of making a decision like that in 3 or 4 months, so I think that we've left that. So, and that was interesting, in talking to the developers, they were going to do senior housing, and the problem with it is that it's hard to find help to work in these places, and the other one is that our pay rate is so high. A lot of these places, you know, you pay them $8, $9 an hour, and they come in and they work. In Rochester, I think the minimum you're going to get paid anywhere is $15 an hour. So that raises costs for people.
And it is hard to find help. We last week talked with the Salvation Army about the Taste of the Town, which happens the 1st of April. But they can't, I said, when are you going to start your store again? And they said, no, it's too hard to get help.
It is, and you know, we're lucky to have the Salvation Army. They do a phenomenally good job here in Rochester, and they run a day center. They run a lot of different programs out of there. And I've visited their site, and the majors there do a phenomenally great job of what they do. And I know Jerry Williams is on their board, and he speaks highly of him, and they try very hard to help people who need help. And so I'm very impressed with the Salvation Army.
Yeah. In fact, what do you think about the Y leaving?
You know, that was really hard. I've been a Y guy all my life, and Chuck Ozama would have told you that I knew me since I was this tall. I worked there as a lifeguard and swim instructor when I was in high school, and I was a lifeguard coordinator there for a little while. We tried to work with YMCA of the North, who owns the building now. They bought it, they didn't buy it, they took it over about 4 years ago from the local Y. And we worked with them on the aquatic center. We wanted to keep that aquatic center open, and it was just too hard for us to all to come together. I had donations set up, we had programming. There's a great need for more aquatics area in Rochester. And it was interesting talking to the YMCA of the North, and I'm going to use numbers that are roundabout numbers. The building's worth about $9 million. They had about $3 million worth of debt. So there's $6 million there, and they made it very clear that the Y is not leaving Rochester, that they're going to reinvest that money into Rochester. They already have daycare. YMCA of the United States is the largest daycare provider in the United States. And they've already out searching for an executive director to run programming in Rochester. So that was nice to hear, you know, that they're doing that, and it'd be interesting to see. The building just became too hard for them to maintain, and things have changed, and it was difficult for it to leave. But we need things for kids to do. We need that 11 to 18-year-old needs to belong to something. And so that's kind of an emphasis that we've been trying to work on, is how do we do that? Keeping the pools open is one of them. There's a boxing club that like to take the boxing ring down to the old fire station and put that down there. The old fire station at Silver Lake is now going to become our accessible rec, and we'll have a home for those guys to be able to have a home and come and do some programming. And I'm excited for that. My boys were in that when they were younger, and during the summer they would have kids. You'd drop your kid off, and they would take them to do different events and take them to Silver Lake. It was fun to watch them walk. And one of the things you learned about that was the kids who were the supervisors and working with these kids, a lot of them went into that field. They found that they had a niche for that. They had a love to help out handicapped kids and handicapped people, and it was just such a rich, rewarding thing that the park department does do.
So we didn't decide whether the bridge was going to be just cars, or whether it was going to be people and bicyclists, and whether there were going to be plants. So is there any decision yet?
Well, we decided to move ahead, and I don't know the cost. There will be cars. I mean, I think there may be one council person that doesn't want cars, but everybody else wants cars. We need that to make travel through Rochester a little bit easier and faster and more convenient. There will be bikes, there will be pedestrians. I don't know how much, if there will be any plants or anything on it. You know, we did Elton Hills Bridge, and we don't have any on it. The 4th Street Bridge over on Southeast and the 6th Street Bridge have plantings on it, but I don't think that we'll go that far in that area.
So it's a dollar question now.
Well, it's you know, again, for me, it's not just the original dollars. If the federal government's paying 80% of it, that's a nice deal. It's still our taxpayer dollars. But how do you maintain all that stuff? And so, you know, now we hand it over to the park department and say, here's one more thing that you need to do, and we're not going to give you any more money for staff or anything else. That makes it really difficult. You know, otherwise we raise tax rates, and we raise your tax rate, and you're paying for flowers and paying for this, and I'm not particularly sure that there's a lot of need for that. So.
No. In fact, you had some other observations about the park department and Soldiers Field.
Well, right now we're doing a master plan at Soldiers Field, and we're asking people to weigh in on it. One of the proposals is to eliminate golf. The mayor put together a task force with some people from golf who said, let's look at the golf plan. The golf plan just came, and we're going to do how do we want golf to look in Rochester. I believe that the city council and citizens want to keep Soldiers Field Golf Course an 18-hole golf course. It's unique in the area. It's unlike any of the other ones. It's shorter. It's flat. A lot of seniors use it. It's the busiest golf course that we have. It's the least expensive golf course that we have. And so I I don't know why we'd want to change it, other than the fact that the property is downtown and it's convenient to build something or do something different. And I don't, that was a gift to Olmsted County, to the city of Rochester from the American Legion. And it was for the youth of Olmsted County. So,
Okay.
One of the examples we were talking about was the track, and how they didn't want to maintain the track and they wanted to redo it differently. We fought that, and we got it to be a good track. And 50 years now we've had the kids down there with track, and in the summertime. I did that as a kid. They all-comers track meet, and you go down there and you see, I'm going to say, 200 kids running around and doing different activities, and it's just a neat experience for them in the summertime to go down and use that facility.
All right, we have like 4 minutes left. This is the fastest half hour on television, I think, and no commercials. But anyway, the biggest issue facing the city council right now.
Probably how we're moving forward, how we deal with DMC. I think we're going to have to do a revamp on how we who's in charge of DMC and how we're moving ahead on that. I think it's one of the bigger issues. It's going to be an interesting election. You have 3 council people come up, you have the mayor come up and see where the emphasis, that what we hear. One of the things I like about elections is you talk to people and you listen to people and you get all difference of opinions. I enjoy that. I enjoy campaigning. It's nice to be out there. I have a lot of friends who are marathon runners, and they'll put brochures out for me, and they'll tell you, and I will tell you, it's harder to knock on doors or put brochures out than it is to run a marathon. And you can run straight in a marathon, but you put a flyer on a door, walk 60 feet, go to the next house, put another flyer on, stop, turn around. It's hard work, but it's rewarding. I've learned a lot talking to different people and the outreach with you. So I think that'll change how the emphasis is coming up for us. We're going to be doing some retreats to kind of get a little bit more understanding on your different council people. It's been difficult in the last 2 years with COVID, shut down and not meeting in person. Now we meet in person. It's hard not to see someone's eyes or see their body language, and I think you're nicer when you're together than on a Zoom call where you can say something that maybe you don't really mean or see what the reaction is. So I'm looking forward to it. I enjoy the council. We have 7 individuals that all have unique experiences, all bring something different to the council. So I like that also,
We didn't talk about freedom of speech, and we didn't talk about the city of Minneapolis and the proposal their mayor has made about a Department of Public Safety with the fire and police and everybody all under that department.
Well, Rochester, public safety, for me, the city council does 3 things is what we're supposed to do. Public safety, police and fire, public works, roads, sewers, and then park department. And Rochester is very fortunate that we've invested in our fire department, we've invested in our police department. One of the things that I found kind of odd was that, we have cameras on all our body cam for all of our officers. Austin doesn't. There's a lot of little cities, a lot of big cities in Minnesota that don't have body cameras, but that was an investment that we did to protect not just our officers, but protect our public. And there's a cost to that. We do a lot of training. I'm very proud of our chief. Chief Franklin has done a phenomenally great job of communicating, going out in the community. We do safe city nights. Officers go out there, and so we'll go back to the freedom of speech issue, and I was talking to the mayor. I talked to her once a month, but I talked to more than that, but we have a meeting set up once a month, and she said that there are people who didn't want the police chief to come talk to this group about crime. And that's odd. We want the police chief to come talk, and so the American Experiment had a presentation at the country club, and some people got a petition together that said they didn't want to have freedom of speech in Rochester, and they didn't want the police chief, they didn't want to have this experience. So I found that to be odd and offending. I think it's offensive not to have freedom of speech. So I went to Owatonna that night and listened to what the presentation was. And they had their county sheriff, they had their police chief, they had their superintendent, and they had this gentleman from the FBI, former FBI agent, who did a presentation on crime in Minnesota and what you can do to help out and where it's heading. And it was very interesting and non-inflammatory. So I believe that, and this is just what I've heard, is that they had said something American Experiment did on school districts, and but they wanted not to have the police chief speak or other people to speak, which is, again, offensive to me. And freedom of speech is important to us. It's an underlying thing for America. So I was offended by that.
Okay, now, it's an election year.
Yes.
Are you running?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
And we didn't get answers on the bridge, and we didn't get answers on the parks, and I think they'll just continue.
That's a fun thing about working in a community and working. You know, I serve the 5th Ward, and I take that serious. That this is public service, and I've learned that from a young age that different people in Rochester have done public service, and to me, that's an important part of our job.
Shaun Palmer, thank you.
Thank you.
For another half hour, and keep up the good work.
Thank you for having the show.
All right, thank you, our viewers, for your interest in the city and the cities around the city and the state and the nation and the world. We'll be with you again next week, same time, same channel. Have a very good week and a very good night.